Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we'll be talking about how to make vocal chops to sound like this. Alright, so in this video we're basically going to go over a few different ways on how you can make vocal chops, and then also kind of go over how exactly I made this one here, and then also the processing on the chops as well. Before we get started, I just want to do a big shout out to BKAYE. He's actually the one who helped me out with these chops and then showed me a lot of the processing as well. And there's also some things that Nurko showed me here as well that will be intertwined, so definitely credit will also go to Nurko as well. Alright, let's go ahead and get right into this tutorial. Alright, so basically, generally when I create melodies or vocal chops or whatever you want to call it, there's definitely a few different ways that can kind of help you get started. Sometimes I will, have some type of atmosphere sound or chords playing in the background so I can get a certain vibe to help me create the sound or the melody. That's generally what I found helpful at times. I mean, sometimes I can also just create a melody out of thin air and then build chords around that. So honestly, it's just personal preference and what you feel is best to you. Some people like to, have some type of inspiration first, have the atmospheres, chords and stuff like that, and then create, a melody around that. Sometimes I think people maybe start with the rhythm or the drums or percussions. Sometimes people like to build a whole track out and then you can, build a melody around that. For me personally right now, I actually got this method from my boy Severman, but generally I like to kind of create my drop melody or whatever you want to call it first, and then I'll build the entire track around the drop melody. But yeah, again, it's just personal preference, and just do whatever method is easiest or best for you. So basically the first method on how you can kind of create your vocal chops is basically right clicking and then slice to new MIDI track. You can do to whatever note of your choice. We're gonna do a fourth note, slicing preset built in, and press OK. And now pretty much after that, everything is pretty much just sliced up into fourth notes, and you can basically just plug and play on a certain melody that you like. So you can just just do fourth notes. And then you can basically just kind of build your melody around that, and then basically the way you can also transpose it and go into separate individual slices. So let's say we want to just change the transposition for slice 30. Obviously this is not a full vocal chop, but I'm just kind of showing you the method, and you can kind of do your own thing with it. But yeah, basically if you want to transpose it, you would basically just kind of and also I think before you do this too, when you do the slice to MIDI, maybe make sure that's on complex, just so that when you slice it to MIDI, I think it'll automatically be complex here rather than beats, so that way when you pitch it and stuff, it won't sound weird. But yeah, basically if you want to kind of play around with pitch and stuff, you can just kind of transpose it to a pitch of your choice, and you just kind of select each slice that you want to pitch. And then basically sometimes you can even just write on your keyboard or piano, whatever instrument of your choice, for example, and then write a melody that you want, and then you can just find the notes of the chop, and then basically just kind of match that melody that you created. Or you can just sometimes just hearing the chops can create something, spark a new idea or inspiration for you, and definitely just go with that. Go wherever it flows. That's definitely the way to go about it. But yeah, that's pretty much method one. For the chop that you heard in the preview, it was a bit of a different method, but we'll definitely get into that one a little later. And then method two is very similar. Basically just we're gonna drop this in the sampler thing here, and then we're just gonna go to slices, and that basically just slices everything, and then you can adjust the sensitivity to how much you want sliced and stuff. And then you can also change the fade in if you want to get those clicks out and the fade out. Pretty self-explanatory there. And then lastly, if you don't want to slice by transient, you can also like slice by beats. And then you can also choose like what note you want. So this is like every 4th note. You can also do like every 8th note. Completely up to you. And then basically you can even try like moving these arrows here back and forth depending, you know, wherever you want to cut, for example. So possibilities are endless. Feel free to experiment and you know, try out whatever method you feel is best for you. Yeah, and that's pretty much that. And the plus side with this method is that like if you do like use your MIDI keyboard to like play piano, for example, or you know, play out your melodies and stuff like that. That's the plus side with this method, is that you can basically just simply you know, play around on the keyboard, and then you can start making melodies like that. Or you can basically just draw it out again, same idea, you know. Yeah, and basically just make a melody like that. Either way, doesn't really matter. Just comes down to personal preference, basically. And generally, like, you know, maybe to help you spark some inspiration, it's just good to like start with a standard EQ. Again, really up to you. You can even just start, you know, with nothing on it too. It doesn't really matter. But if it helps you, like, you can start with just your classic like EQ, and then like reverb of your choice, basically, and you know, just starting from there, basically. Yeah, and then you can just, yeah, so that way you can have a bit more inspiration if you want. All right, so now going on to method 3, which is basically how we did these chops. And actually I made, on my unreleased track, I did a very similar process. Well, not exactly similar. It's basically just like, you know, it's kind of similar, but a little different. But it's basically just like you have a vocal, and then you just kind of like, you know, slice things up to taste of what you like, and then basically like kind of piece it together like a puzzle. So yeah, basically with this method is like you basically just drag and drop, you know, assuming that you maybe don't have a acapella, or maybe you do have an acapella. You can also use acapella, or you can also just, you know, drag a bunch of splice samples. And then do a similar approach where, like, you know, you have a bunch of different vocals, and then you kind of like piece together bits and parts of what you like. So in this instance, we are in the key of F sharp minor, or A major. The F sharp is the relative minor of A major. But yeah, you know, you basically just kind of like go to your splice, you know, hit the F sharp minor, and then basically all the vocals. Maybe you want to press vocals too, but you know, it already showed up, so I kind of just did it. And then you basically, what you do is just kind of like drag and drop everything, you know, into different audio tracks. I already made the separate audio tracks, but you know, in the case that you didn't, you know, that's basically what you would do. And then after that, let's just say, for example, like you already had, like what I had was like, I already had like a kind of like rough draft or a rough drop already. And basically like you can just kind of like play those vocals over the drop. So let's hear this. So like, you know, I can just do this. And that already like really sounded really nice, and that's actually the vocal that we used. Just, you want to make sure that obviously like it's the same BPM. We were lucky in this case that, like, you know, that it was already in 128, so didn't really have to do much there. And yeah, that's basically what you kind of do. You know, you kind of like, you know, sift through and then see like which one you like. And then basically you would kind of just like, you know, take parts that you like and parts that you don't like. So that's literally what we did here. And then we're just gonna go ahead and duplicate this so I can kind of like show you what we cut. So again, this is what the whole thing sounds like. So basically what we did was we just took this right here. Again, this is kind of like, you know, what I've kind of talked about in the last video about like the call and response, or the question answer, or, you know, the structure of certain, like, you know, melodies. You have like A, B, A, C section. So this would be like the A section. And then basically we take this and kind of like duplicate it like that, so like it doesn't like, you know, so it doesn't like get too repetitive. Because if we just kind of did this again, you know, it just might be a little too repetitive to kind of captivate the person's ear. Yeah, so that's pretty much the reason why, you know, we kind of made a little bit of variation here. And then this was actually initially kind of empty, and then we filled it out, you know, with again with the same exact type of process. So, and then this one here, we basically just took the later part of the same vocal. So, whoops. And we basically just took that right there. And again, it's the same vocal and did the same exact type of pattern again. And like just duplicated that. And then we basically just took the ending of that, the hey part right there. So this is what kind of sounds like without this. And then basically what you can do after that, you know, is just basically repeat that again. Again, like a lot of these concepts, if you haven't seen yet, you can basically watch in the how to write compelling art melodies and melodies in general. The second half of the video or so, I basically kind of go about, you know, how you can kind of create these like type of melodies with like structure basically. So a lot of the same principles can be applied here as well. So yeah, basically now we have like the A and B part and then also the A and C part. And then if you kind of like listen in context, like, you know, obviously the LFO came a little bit later, you know, when this was already filled out, you know, but just for like the sake of example, like now maybe you can start filling in the sections that you might want to fill in, or if you don't like the certain melodies in certain sections, you can try out different melodies with a very similar approach. So like, you know, what we did basically here was like, we had, again, all the vocals like just basically lined up already on the audio track. And then like we just kind of listened what would kind of like go good there. So, and then like we just kind of like listen to that one, and then we listen to this one. And we already, this is the same exact one we used already, so, you know, like we didn't really use that one, so we're like, you know what, let's just try the first bit of this one and just like kind of plug and play. And it's like, oh shit, you know, like that works. So that's pretty much exactly how that happened. And then, you know, again with the same structure, you can have it repeat. Sorry, let me close these so it doesn't get as confusing, hopefully. And then, so this is the first section, and then you can also do the same section again, but you probably want to do some more variation here just because like it might get too repetitive if you do this again. So like it works, but like, you know, it kind of just repeats a little bit too much. So to kind of keep that listener interested, you definitely most likely want to change that up, you know. And again, like melodies are all like personal preferences. I've probably said many times by now, but you know, that this is basically just kind of like my own preference. So just go with, you know, whatever you feel is right. And basically just to, you know, fill this space out again, that's literally, we did the same exact thing. We just kind of like tested out like what vocal we liked the most, and I don't think this vocal was in there quite yet. I can't remember what this was. Yeah, so that's this vocal here by itself. And then yeah, again we just took that first part and just see if it worked. Yeah, and that definitely works because, like, again, as mentioned in my previous video, it's like a lot of the same mechanics for, like, in terms of like turnaround. You can kind of like use some type of like exotic. Doesn't always have to be exotic notes, or more quote unquote advanced notes from using like suspended notes, ninths, sevens, and stuff like that. As long as it sounds good, you're good to go. But it's more or less using the same mechanic because it actually resolves on the one right there, and I don't know what the other note is, but yeah, that's basically the basic idea behind that. So yeah, that's pretty much like the in terms of like how to create the melody right there. And if you had like again, like kind of going back to if you already had an acapella, you can basically just chop it up into different sections that you like, and then use your ear to like kind of create a melody that you like. I thought this one was pretty cool because like now you have more options and not really just tied to like one acapella. So yeah. But yeah, in terms of processing, it's more or less, I would say, pretty simple. So we actually have 2 layers. We'll go over the first one. That's what it sounds like. And basically, this is completely up to you. You don't really have to put soothe first. Some people put like an EQ, cutting out the 100s first. Whatever works. But basically, this is kind of like cleaning up the vocal first. So that way when you distort it, it's not really distorting any of like, I guess, like the more like harsh frequencies. So in this vocal in particular, and it's gonna be situational for each vocal, so just gotta pay attention to like what kind of like sounds a little bit too heavy in the mix basically. So this one in particular though is really like heavy around the 500 range. So this is basically what Soothe is doing. Just taking care of those frequencies. I mean, you can already kind of see here too, it's already bumping up there. So that's literally what the Soothe is doing. And then we're distorting it after with Lifeline Expanse. This is a really cool plugin. You don't have to necessarily use this plugin. I just really like the distortion and the sound that it gave. You can use Saturator, Saturn 2, Decapitator, whatever you want. But basically, we're basically just kind of distorting with the dirt. And the amp basically this is kind of like what it sounds without the Lifeline, and then with. There's a lot of distortion in there. And let's just say, for example, that you don't have this, you can also use like I'll just use like a stock to make it easier. And it's gonna be pretty simple, if you use like Decapitator and stuff, because it's just like one button, and Saturn the same thing, it's just like one button. But yeah, if you want to use like Saturator, you can like use, I don't know, some type of soft sine curve, turn up the depth a bit to taste. I'm gonna do this really quickly. And you're already kind of like getting some distortion. That's obviously overdoing it, and you can like turn down the mix. And then like, probably like, since it's gonna put up the volume when you drive it up that much, you just kind of like balance it out. So yeah, that's basically how you kind of like distort with the stock Saturator, which actually I used that one on my unreleased track. So, and that's actually what Nurko showed me, was a certain way that you can distort your vocal chops. But yeah, and then after the Lifeline Expanse, you basically have an OTT, really, pretty standard compression, and then I mean, there's like so many different ways that you can process your vocal chops. So like it's like absolutely endless. So definitely, just experiment and kind of like go, with what you feel like, because the processing I had for my previous track is a bit different, but a lot of the similar mechanics are applied. And then basically here we have EQ next. Basically just cutting out all the highs, and then actually bumping up the 1K range. So basically, like, the reason why we boosted this is basically just kind of like to make the vocal chop pop out more in the mix, and then kind of like dipping that same frequency in the saws. So basically what you would do is press this headset button, and then you just kind of like find where the main like body is. So the most of the body right there is going on around the 1K hertz range, and basically what we did is just bumped it up by 2 dBs, just a little bit, not like kind of overdoing it or anything, and then doing it to cue to taste. And then what you would do is basically like take that, do the same thing with the saws, but dipping out around the same, that way you basically, make the vocal chops pop out more. Because if we didn't do this, this is kind of what it would sound like in a mix. So this is what it sounds like without that EQ applied. And then with it applied. Just really pay attention to those 1000 Hz mid-range. So yeah, you can basically kind of hear like you're kind of giving a bit more room for those vocal chops to like, pop out more in the mix. And I thought that was a really cool kind of thing that you can do to like, have them come out more. You probably don't necessarily always have to do that, but it's definitely, like a nice touch, because I actually didn't do that on my other track, but yeah. Okay, and then up next is Little Ultra Boy. This is only doing things, at a certain time. Yeah, so just kind of like, adding some more rhythm and motion to it. Honestly, like you can even like, rather than using it as what I'm using it here for, you can just like, pitch it up to get that like classic, future bass like squeaky sound. Or you can do that way. Yeah, so, and then like, after like, say for example, like you pitch it up all the way with the formants and stuff like that, you can layer another layer under it, rather than being, this layer is like, everything is like -12, so rather than do -12, you can just do, a regular layer, and then this one, up an octave. So completely up to you. We'll go over the bottom one in just a sec too. And then basically up next we have like an S1 imager, just so that the vocal chops can basically like take less space from the sides, because you already have like a lot of saws are taking that space from the sides. So this is literally just to kind of put the vocal chops in the middle. This is kind of like what it sounds like if you were not to have it in the middle like this. And then just with it on. So basically, it basically like gives a lot more room for the saws to breathe basically. And then sometimes, this is just really situational on like what you want to do with this. Sometimes you put it like closer to the end. But in this case, we did it before the reverb, because basically what we're doing is that like we're making the vocal like, more in the mids, and then like when there's room to breathe, like for example in here, that's when you kind of hear like the reverb just like, goes a bit more stereo. So if you listen closely, so you hear that like reverb every time, like it's like in the mid, and then like, the reverb kind of like, goes a bit more stereo. But yeah, I thought that was like something really cool that you can do. You don't like necessarily always have to do that. It's kind of like a situational thing. And then next step we have like a delay, basically really minimal delay, about a fourth, very low in the feedback, like 10% on a dry wet, and then just doing this kind of like almost like a phone EQ looking type of thing on this. And also there's like a ping pong on the delay, just to kind of like, make it go back and forth. And then also sometimes like, if you have this, it's only gonna be probably more in cases when you have more spaces in between, rather than just not too many spaces. But sometimes you could also like put this on a separate bus rather than on the vocal itself, and then also add a compressor, so that way you can like sidechain the delay to the vocal, so that way like basically like when the vocal's playing, the delay isn't there, and then when it's not that playing, that's when the delay opens up in the spaces. So in this case, we didn't necessarily have to do it just because there's not too many spaces, but that's something that you can try out too in the case where like there's more room. And then another EQ after, because sometimes after generally or usually after you distort it and stuff, you're gonna have some like low frequencies again that you don't necessarily want. So yeah, so just some more cleaning up after, and then another soothe after again for more. Basically this is like just rather than using like EQ8. I'm literally doing it for the same purposes of like, you know, taking out resonant frequencies. So yeah, it's just a lot, you know, a lot easier, faster way to do it basically. And just a utility just to bump up some, you know, volume. So that's pretty much it for this layer. And then the duplicate is again the same exact layer, but everything's -12. Again, you can mix and match this. You can bump this up 12, and you can bump this up 12 and have a different tone and just be a little bit more higher pitched. Completely up to you, whatever works. But yeah, this one's less on the processing. You just have a standard decapitator, an EQ, almost the same exact thing. Not really doing that because it's just kind of like a supporting elements. That's why the dBs are like -15. You just have like a standard reverb, and then EQ again, and a soothe again. That's basically it. And then on the group, there's not really much going on either. This is mainly just for like automation purposes and stuff like that. Like there's an auto filter, like kind of at the end of it, so you can transition. I don't even know. It's actually on the drop instruments, but yeah. So that's just like all like effects stuff. Oh yeah, there's also like a kickstart, just to kind of give it a bit more rhythm. And then I also did like a dynamic EQ. Just basically clicking this, so it only like dips out, you know, when it's needed to dip out. And then basically, yeah, you would just click the certain area that you want. Do this again, and basically just make dynamic. And then yeah, and then you basically just do it to tastes. Yeah. This is basically what it sounds like. You know, it's very subtle, but this is without the dynamic EQ. And then with, just to kind of give more room in that, like, you know, mid 500-ish frequency range. Then last but not least, we basically just have an LFO. This is a shape, just kind of like adding more rhythm and interest to the track, because it might get a little stale if basically, like, you know, we didn't have this like rhythmic interest. As you may have already seen in my, you know, my tutorial and stuff, you know, it's great to have a full drop, but I think to also like enhance your you know, drops a bit more, there's definitely should be some more extra, you know, fills. Even this drop is not even completely finished with the fills, but you know, you got the basic idea of the vocal chop. That was the main purpose of this video anyway. But you know, just adding these like extra things definitely helps add to your track to make it sound more interesting. And yeah, I'm not going to go too deep on like, you know, adjusting the shapes for your LFO tool, but you can like adjust the shape and it'll kind of like change the rhythm a little bit. So yeah, it kind of gives a bit of a different rhythm. Personally, I just kind of like this one, so I just kind of left it there, but you're welcome to experiment. And then yeah, as mentioned, like there's some auto filter like automations as well that you can see happening right there every so often too, to again add to the extra interest. But yeah, honestly, I think that's gonna be it for this video. So, you know, if you found that helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and then subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet. And also please hit the bell notification symbol so you know when my next video goes live. We'll definitely, you know, post more videos like this and more production tips, a lot in future bass and perhaps some in progressive house. Also follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I post like shorter music production tips on there, so definitely follow me in there. And then also join the Discord server. I'm looking to create a community where we can all kind of like help each other grow, give each other feedback and stuff as producers and stuff. So if that's something that you find interesting, definitely join that. I will leave all the links in the description below. Thanks so much again. Until next time, much love. Peace out.